What do you mean exactly by market design, and why is it important to study it?
Well, markets have rules. So design is both a noun and a verb. Markets have designs, and economists can study them and see what is the effect of particular designs on the way the market works. And it's also a verb. When markets are broken, we can try to fix them by designing improved markets. I'm a game theorist by training. I use mathematics to study markets designs, what the rules of the game, that's why it's called game theory, because we study rules. And for a long time, I didn't do market design, I just studied the design of markets. And at some point, I was asked to redesign the labor market for new doctors in the United States. And that's when I became a market designer, because I agreed to do that, and I realized that it would change the nature of my interest in markets if I was going to become responsible for how they worked instead of just curious about how they worked.
How do you consider the political and the ethical aspects in your studies? The market must always have the last word, or
we regulate markets. Regulations are part of market design. One reason markets need to be redesigned sometimes is they're not producing outcomes that we like, right? That they're producing too much income inequality, or not enough kidney transplants, or making it too difficult for parents to get their children into appropriate schools. So markets are human artifacts. They are like languages, which are also human artifacts. And just as there are lots of different human languages, there are also lots of different kinds of markets. And when times change, we need to change both our language and our markets. There are lots of words in Italian and English that didn't used to be there, like smartphone. So we don't often think of languages as something that are tools that humans make, but of course they are, and so are markets. And when they aren't working the way we like, we should change them.
So the regulation is not the only answer. We also need limits to self determination.
Well, so I talked today about how different countries see an attempt to impose different limits. And sometimes we can be successful in proposing limits, and we are, politically, happier when we successfully impose limits. Sometimes we don't want to impose limits on the things that people can do. And sometimes we would like to impose limits, but we're not able to. We just drive the market that we have banned underground, and it becomes run by criminals in a black market. And so when there are markets that we don't like, we have to understand better whether we can eliminate them, or whether a black market might be worse than a legal and regulated market.
The last question, Professor Roth. The global problems that we face today, such as the environmental crisis or inequalities, can find a solution within the logic of the market, or we also start we must to start to think to different schemes.
Well, I think we should be thinking both within and outside of markets. So there are markets for carbon emissions that are active in Europe and in the United States that try to ease the path for reducing carbon emissions by allowing the permits to be traded, so that the people who can most cheaply eliminate their carbon emissions should do so first. There are also ways that many markets can be shaped, for instance, by taxation. It might be good to have a carbon tax, so that every use of carbon would be reflected in the cost of the products that use carbon. So that's something that governments can try to do. It's hard for individual governments to do that, because if you have a carbon tax in Italy, then you might import lots of goods that can no longer be made in Italy from outside of Italy. But if we could agree on international treaties about carbon, that would shape all the markets that use carbon.